Hey guys, Vulcan Trader here. This gonna be a video on Bitcoin fundamentals. This is important, I think, because I think it's probably gonna be the best investment idea that exists right now out of anything. I mean, it's gonna perform better than any stock, any real estate, you name it. And this will explain why, my thoughts, reasoning behind it, conviction behind it. And there's a lot of misconception, misunderstanding about things. And so I'm trying to answer every single question someone that maybe didn't believe in cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, what they could think, and the reasons why it is a good thing, and why you should invest in it. And so it'll be kind of long, but I'm gonna put out all my thoughts here, and I'll share this document at the end of the video, or in the show notes at the end of the video, and this way you can kind of just listen to it too. I know I'll read through it. Maybe I don't think it'll be boring, but be kind of long. So, all right, here we go. So, also you shouldn't. So, something else I didn't put in here. You shouldn't value currency like a stock. Like I've had people say, "Oh, well, it doesn't have any cash flows" or something like that. Well, that's not how you value a currency. A currency is valued just by supply and demand for the currency in order for just people that want to buy it with another currency or to buy things. Because there's demand for U.S. dollars because stocks, bonds, oil, real estate, is priced in U.S. dollars all across the world, and so that's why it has the largest demand and is the best or most important currency currently. And then so if that happened for any of the cryptocurrencies, that would be how you would value it or its potential. So first off, what gives money value? Only people's belief in the money does. The U.S. dollar, abides by the same thing. The U.S. dollar and the euro only have value because people believe they do and are willing to accept it as payment. If they did not believe and accept it as payment, then it would not have value. The same is true for any cryptocurrency. If people believe it has value, then it does. Simple as that. Nothing more, nothing less. People will say that the US dollar is backed by the government and cryptocurrency is not backed by anything. This is a meaningless statement. What does backed mean? Or backed by the government mean? All they can do to back it is print more of it, which doesn't do anything but decrease its value. So backing, they can't really do anything. Okay, so now that's out of the way. Everyone talks about cryptocurrency, about how the blockchain is the future, and that's the only value that crypto provides. They're misunderstanding all the properties that it brings. Blockchain is just a piece of it that will automate what the banking industry does now. And so first you have to list out all the problems with our current fiat system to understand it properly. So as far as I understand it, central banks print the money out of nothing, buy bonds from the government or mortgage-backed securities, other debt instruments. That money becomes deposits in JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citi, who then lend it out at roughly a 10-to-1 fractional reserve ratio and create even more money. And those loans become deposits of slightly smaller amounts in the reserves of other banks, who then lend it out again at that 10-to-1 fractional reserve ratio. And the cycle continues until they don't have any more reserves to lend out, or people won't borrow, or they won't lend out to people, maybe because they're not good people to lend out to. And this is the same for any central bank and all the banks in other countries too, not just the Federal Reserve in the United States system. This is a worldwide thing. Okay, so it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around this at first, but if you really want to understand it, this video I have here in this document is the ultimate video to understand how the current financial system works, and very few people know about it. But I think it's important that everybody does understand it, just for your own well-being, to understand the kind of the game that you're in and forced to play. Right. So if you really want to dive into it, the history of the Federal Reserve and the banking system, you read the book The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is actually how I found out about it. But it's a super long book, but it's an excellent read. So the problems are: one, the central banks have the ability to print money out of nothing and steal from the people through inflation by destroying their purchasing power. And then two, fractional reserve ratio of the banks, the other individual banks lending out more money that is not theirs on top of the base money printing from the Federal Reserve, which causes even more inflation. And the boom and bust cycles, when the fractional reserve money expands and contracts, that's what causes those boom and bust cycles. Not necessarily the printing from the Fed, but it's more the fractional reserve lending that goes out and expands when it's easy money times, and then contracts in hard money times. So it would be smoother without that. And then all money is created as debt also. Every time that the Federal Reserve prints money out of nothing, they buy bonds or some other debt instruments. So there's always interest that has to be paid on that money. And they charge interest on, but then there's, so more money is always owed than there's money in existence. So they have to print more to pay off the prior amount, and it's a literal impossibility for every person in the world to be out of debt. And if you did pay off everyone's debt, there would be no more money. Also makes you think, oh, there's a lot of people that are poor in debt. Some of them can't help it. The only people that can be out of debt are the ones that actually perform better than the average. So don't look down on people that are in debt, because they really can't help it. It's impossible for everyone to be out of debt. It's controlled by the government, central banks, and banks, who can use it to fund war, steal from people through inflation, bailouts, bail-ins, etc., which put further burdens upon the average individual and give more power to those at the top. And those people are in control of the government and things like that. And then unless we went to an all-cash system, you need a middleman or trusted third party, i.e. a bank, to hold your money, to make payments, to keep track of balances, etc. And so most people maybe never doesn't know this, but a gold system can solve all the problems that I just listed for the most part. They can't make it at will or print as much of it as they want. You can't fractional reserve gold because you can't, lend out more than you have. Only you can do that with the, current banking system. I'm not going to bother to explain that, but that's the truth. Gold isn't created as debt because it's just mined, that businesses mine it, and no one owes anyone whenever it's created. And then any debt created by banks or people lending gold is very limited. There's always the same amount somewhere in the system to pay it off. And then government has limited power to control it because they can't print it. And then you don't have a trusted third party to make payments, hold deposits, move the gold from one person to another. The movement from the gold from one person to another is an accounting system in itself. So let me go. Historically, any society that had pure gold and silver coins and didn't debase them, no paper money, no fractional reserve lending, or money created as debt, was very prosperous. Like the early Roman Empire, the early U.S., Byzantine Empire. So once you allowed debasement, paper money printing, fractional reserve lending, money created as debt, then you run into problems eventually. However, if a country does stay financially healthy by not implementing any of these, they'll lose any long-term war. This is actually why Napoleon eventually lost, because the Bank of England and the Rothschilds could print unlimited money. Napoleon didn't want the country to go into debt to the bankers, but he ended up losing because of that, because he couldn't fund it as much as the England, who had the money printing system. And then any government that does some or all of these, the fractional reserve lending, printing money at will, etc., i.e. the United States, and it has its money as the world reserve currency. So if they do all those things and have a world reserve currency, we'll be able to fund its wars the longest and become the dominant military power. So the United States has been able to do that. I'm not saying that's wrong or anything. I'm just stating the facts, okay? So what is financially prosperous to the most number of people is a gold-like standard. But and that's only if you're in times of peace. If you need to win a war and be the dominant world power, then you do all the fiat stuff, which we had to do in World War II, right, to defeat Hitler, etc. So you can still be prosperous with some fiat, obviously, for a time, but the people in power never have enough self-control to keep it reined in when it's not needed. So it has to fail eventually, because the central bankers, the politicians and stuff, they always want to promise more, print more in order to fund all their pet programs and get elected and keep the power. So they eventually take it to its limits and it fails. So that being said, the limits of gold are that, one, it can be stolen or confiscated. If it's in my house, a thief could find it or steal it. A bank could be robbed if the gold is in the bank. If I need to fly or drive somewhere, it could be confiscated by government or police. If it has to be physically transported or stored, which can be difficult if you have a large amount to store or transport. That can be costly to do either. And then to send any amount a long distance takes a long time. So if you want to send it from U.S. to China, it takes a long time. And then people aren't going to be buying stuff on Amazon with gold or silver, right? That just will never happen. It would just be too cumbersome. And then it can be controlled by the government a little, as there's a need to standardize it through coinage so that there's not counterfeits and stuff like that. Or they could do forced confiscation, like with FDR actually did that in the period of time where it was illegal for Americans to own gold, if you didn't know that, and they confiscated the gold from people that did have it. So then we get to crypto. Crypto solves, or can solve, all the problems of both fiat money and gold. So there's a limited amount created, You can't fractional reserve lend it or create it. It isn't created as debt. It's usually by proof of work or proof of stake. It isn't controlled by governments, central banks, or banks, other than you have to use them to convert fiat to Bitcoin currently on exchanges whenever you have to go through the banking system to buy Bitcoin on Coinbase or whatever you use. It can't be stolen or confiscated, other than maybe like if they held you at gunpoint and made you give up your private key or something, then they could do that. But it can't, they can't like physically grab it without, you have to willingly give it to them, right? And then other than by hacking, that is, maybe if you had, but if you have a properly coded cryptocurrency or network with a properly coded wallet, then it shouldn't be able to be stolen or hacked. And then big banks have been hacked also just as much, I believe. But anyway, if you have a wallet, you can memorize your secret, and your money is essentially in your head, and you can go anywhere. And the only way they can get it from you is by force or coercion, maybe holding a gun to your head. And then 6, it doesn't have to be stored anywhere and can be sent anywhere in the world across borders instantly. Our current digital banking system can't even do that. It takes days. And it doesn't need which is ridiculous in 2019 if you think about it, that it takes, you should be able to send money in less than a minute to any bank account, make any payment, whatever. It's just ridiculous how long it takes to do bank transfers and stuff. And then it doesn't need a trusted third party or bank for payments and accounting. This is where the blockchain comes in. It does the accounting for the system, automates banks, makes them obsolete. And then, so you are your own private bank in this case. And then you send to other people's private banks directly without the third party of having a bank or, our current banks. And then some people give the narrative of the possibility of a forced crypto dollar controlled by the government that has a blockchain. And this won't happen because it isn't if it did happen, it's the exact same as our current system, other than it's on a blockchain. The government, they would still do all the negative things associated with fiat that I listed at the beginning of my document here, but they would be able to track you better for taxes. And they would keep all the same banks in place using a blockchain ledger within them, even though they are not needed. Anyway, the blockchain itself doesn't provide much value to society. Saying that crypto is a tulip bubble, but the blockchain is here to stay, is something parroted by people that don't completely understand it. And the blockchain, with all its other properties combined that the fiat system doesn't do currently, are exponentially more powerful. And the blockchain is just one important piece of the many properties that cryptocurrencies can provide to become the ultimate currencies that have ever existed for the common people. If they're controlled by governments, they will lose this, and the blockchain will just be a more efficient way for governments to tax us. And I think this also is just, if you look at the world, there's books on this. I think Steven Pinkerton has a book on it. I haven't read it, but the world's always becoming better and improving over time. And so there's just another way that is going to happen, and bad things go away and become better. So number 4, let's see. We don't need to talk about that. It's not that important. Okay. People have short-term memories and don't know their history, but no fiat currency throughout history has ever survived. The Roman Empire currency, the Continental, which was the currency before the United States became a country, and the Weimar Republic in Germany all went into hyperinflation. And then here's a link with the history of the currency of the Roman Empire and its debasement and collapse. The U.S. founding fathers started the country with gold and silver coins, actually, when it was founded, because they had learned their lesson after all sorts of riots and problems after the Continental had been printed into hyperinflation and its collapse. George Washington noted at the time, "A wagon load of currency will hardly purchase a wagon load of provisions." So, and then you also get another thing that people don't realize. It's a kind of a macro cycle that empires or dominant world powers that have the world reserve currency rise and fall in a 250-year cycle on average. It can be, hundreds of years long. Maybe it could be 300, 400, or only 150, but on average it's 250 years. And the empires rise and fall, or just, and then the currencies rise and fall with them. So here's a good book on the rise and fall of empires by John Glubb that talks about all this, and really interesting to read this and compare it to the United States currently. And then this is a graphic. I'll actually pull this one up in the video here. I think it's pretty powerful, but it's the rise and fall of world reserve currencies throughout history. So if you look at You got 1500s is Portugal, then Spain for 110 years, Netherlands for 80 years, France for 95 years, and right about the end of that, roughly about where the French Revolution was, and then Britain until World War One-ish, it looks like, after was when the United States took over, and then we're the world reserve currency. It just means that it's the primary currency that most people accept or use. The world power sort of coincides with this more or less, but anyway. So it just shows that eventually the US dollar won't be the primary world reserve currency is all it's saying in there, and doesn't mean that it won't be a currency that people would trust or use, just like the Great British Pound is still used even though it's not the world reserve currency. But anyway, on top of all this, the central bank so cryptocurrency is not in a bubble at all and is actually way undervalued. So if you're a value investor, this is actually the best place to look, even though most people would say, maybe see otherwise. But the market cap of all cryptocurrencies is it was 130 billion when I wrote this. It's probably, I don't know what it is. It's we can go to CoinMarketCap here. Actually, we'll figure it out. See what it actually is right now. You go to CoinMarketCap.com and this thing keeps popping up. The market cap of all cryptocurrency is 295 billion. Bitcoin itself is only 203 billion. Okay, so that's the market cap of all those. And the market cap of Microsoft alone is $1 trillion, okay? So whichever crypto wins, it could be more than one that will be, used in the future and gains mainstream adoption, will be in the trillions market cap. So if you take 1 trillion and divide it by the total number of 21 million Bitcoin, you get $47,000 per Bitcoin, which is a low estimate still for a major world currency. Also, you got the fact that there's probably 3 to 4 million Bitcoins that are lost, and the other things that'll up that too. All the other coins have a lower market cap and higher potential than that as far as how much it could rise if they end up winning, taking Bitcoin's place, though they're less likely to win. But you should still have, small investments in those, right? This graphic, I think, is the most powerful visualization to show if everything were to be priced in, say, Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. So look at this. So this is all the world's money in markets in one visualization. So you got silver, it's this little bitty square here, cryptocurrency. This is Bitcoin, and then Ethereum is this one, all the rest. This was back when Bitcoin was 100 billion, so it's maybe close to 3 times that size now or something, but still pretty, maybe it's this size, so not that much bigger. And then Microsoft is actually double this size roughly, but Apple was the world's largest public company by market capitalization, was 807 billion at the time, and it's probably a little bit more than that. Maybe it might be $1 trillion now. Apple. But so there's all those, and then look, there's Bitcoin right there. There's the 50 richest people in the world. That's how big their money is. It's 1.9 trillion. California GDP 2.9 trillion. Fed's balance sheet 3.5 trillion. And then this is all the currencies of the world. It's 7.6 trillion, and I think these numbers probably gone up in 2 years quite. And then here's all the gold, 7.7 trillion. This is all the stock markets in the world, 73 trillion. And then here's the global money supply. This is global debt, 215 trillion. Global real estate, 217 trillion. And then this is derivatives, which is just ridiculous. Okay, 544 trillion is the low end estimate for derivatives. This is the high end, 1.2 quadrillion. Just keep scrolling. Yep, that's a lot. Here's Bitcoin. So I think that's pretty convincing there. And then on top of all this, central banks will continue to keep printing money at a breakneck pace. And we already have negative interest rates in Europe, and the U.S. will probably follow some point in the future. I also think it has a good moral component to it that I like. It's the type of money that Jesus would support. Governments steal from us through inflation on top of taxing us already. I'm for government and taxation, by the way, just a smaller government that isn't super controlling. But inflation is stealing because of inflation, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. This is because the rich have more assets, such as stocks and real estate, etc. The poor don't. These assets will always go up in value simply because of inflation, even if they don't increase in productivity. The poor people have salaries that stay roughly the same, and they lose their purchasing power because of inflation. The rich and the government can borrow more money, and that debt that they owe, they know will decrease in value because of inflation as well. So they always go into more debt, which will go down, to buy more assets, which will go up. this stealing of purchasing power from the common man is possible. I mean, this is the poor, the middle class, you name it. It's all possible because of inflation. And so I think inflation is wrong. I also don't think it's right for banks to lend out money that is not theirs without the owner's consent and make interest off of it, which is fractional reserve lending. And I don't think the richer people are bad for doing that. They're just being smart. But if inflation, wasn't there, then they wouldn't do that as much. And only through actual productivity would you make money, not through inflation. And then anyway, I think this is why that everyone should own a little bit of crypto in their portfolio, maybe 1 to 5%, because they're pretty volatile and risky. But you should, own some, maybe some physical gold and silver too, just a really small portion. You should have the typical stuff in real estate and stocks, stuff like that. But just a little bit of all these as a hedge against our current financial system, in case one or many of them become many of the cryptos become major world currencies. So I think that's it. And I just want to share this because I think it's important. And there's a lot of, rich people, big money that are going into this space now. And a lot of people that don't have as much, maybe don't know about it, don't think about it. But, just put a little bit in there and just so that you kind of, for yourself, your family, for your future, so I just want as many common people out there to own some of this so that if this becomes the new financial world paradigm in any way, then, they'll have some of that. And in the next video, I'll show kind of the best, safest way to invest that little bit of your portfolio in it, how I think should do it. That is the lowest risk possible that give you the best gain no matter what type of situation happens. So thanks. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and share with your friends.